Welcome back, Pirate Crew. It's your captain, Yeehaw Yadam, and for today's video, we're doing the classic. So it's Monday, it's 2 weeks after a set drop, and you know what that means. News week, market watch. Let's see what's going on with Kingdoms of Intrigue. So the reason I like to wait a little bit after the set drops instead of just being immediately on top of it is because I want the cards to settle. I want a couple tournaments to play, and I don't want to give you guys variance, right? When I go ahead and record these videos and say, oh, this card is currently like 15 bucks and it jumps up to 30 the next day, we're not really doing too much. But I also want to go ahead and allow people to get some events, get some tournament standings, and a little bit of, you know, spice to come out in the game, so I can go ahead and give that information to you guys in a very digestible way. But first things first, let's talk about what happened on September 22nd. September 22nd, Bandai made it official. The ban list is going to go ahead and stay in place. Now, for any of you guys that have been here on the channel before, you know my thoughts on the current ban list. And if you don't know, let me go ahead and let you know. So initially when this ban list came out, I thought it felt like a little disrespectful when this came out in July to the Western players. It felt like, yes, we have a very vocal majority. These cards are very strong. Not only is Edward Newgate, Radical Beam, and Marco some of the most ridiculous cards in the game, there are other ridiculous cards that are not even on this list that should be even considered further. But without getting too deep into all these cards are broken, is the fact that the East played with 4 of these and continue to play 4 of these in their decks, right? And I thought it was really weird that they were just making this list just to appease some of the more vocal players in the West, right? It wasn't necessarily killing the game, in my opinion, or making it more difficult. These were just cards that we kind of had to just play around that existed in our format. So I didn't really enjoy the ban list. And I know that that's a bit of a spicy take, and a lot of people will agree with me, but I was just not a big fan of it. But now that the ban list has maintained in place, and they're saying, hey, we're going to continue this ban list, now I think the ban list is good. And the reason behind that is nothing other than the fact that this kind of solidifies the idea that Bandai wants to create 2 separate formats. Formats is a lot, but 2 separate lists at least, right? So in Japan or in the East, they're going to have their own format with unlimited Whitebeards and Radical Beams and Marcos, and we're going to get some new restricted list that's going to make the game a little bit different. And what I do like about this is the fact that now we have a dichotomy between the East and the West, which is going to make it a little bit more refreshing when we get these cards, right? Once we get these releases in our section of the world, a lot of people just flock to the Eastern deck list and they're like, oh, this won 2 flagships in Japan, I'm just going to play this exact list. But now you can't. That list has 4 Radical Beams and 4 of the blocker Marcos, right? So you have to make some adjustments. And granted, they're not big adjustments, but at least there is some difference between both of our metas, which gives the game a little bit more breath of life in the West. And we can, you know, fine tune our spice and our goo and really get into the nitty gritty of the One Piece card game and what a set has to offer. Instead of it immediately coming out and being answered for us, we now have the opportunity to find those answers for ourselves, which is really, really nice. So TLDR, ban list stays in place. Ban list good. Yes. And now for, to talk about how the meta is going and how it's moving, let's go ahead and talk about PPG's Knoxville Regional. Now, this regional came out the day right after the set came out, and there's a couple of weird things that happen in this regional and might give you some variance. So let's talk about initially the graph of what's been represented. By the way, if you want to see any of these deck lists yourselves, you can go to eggmanevents.com. He has, not sponsored, not affiliated with Eggman in any way. He's just a really cool guy, another One Piece content creator, Bandai content creator. I guess he's more worldwide than I am. And he has this website where he goes ahead and has all of the One Piece, the Fusion World, Digimon deck list from any topping event. So go ahead and check him out if you want to go ahead and see these lists. But besides that long dragged out shout out, let's talk about top 32. Now I know I'm covering it, but there's a couple of interesting things that happen in this top 32. The first thing to note is that there are 12 Newgates, which a lot of you would say that's not very surprising, but in all honesty, it's a little bit surprising to me. There's a lot of decks that do really well into Edward Newgate, and I haven't really found much of an issue playing against this deck. Now, depending on what the field is and depending on what the majority of players were playing, it's going to dictate what this top 32 is going to be. And the players who ended up choosing to bring Newgate to this event, besides it being a very powerful leader and we've been playing with it for 2 sets, so where it's kind of like figured out at this point, they did a pretty good job at, you know, thinking what their opponents were going to play in a meta where the day before OP-04 came out, people are going to have a little bit of wonkier deck lists. Their deck lists aren't going to be too refined, and you can capitalize that with a refined, strong, aggressive list and just say, yeah, my list is good. You're going to be stat checked into my Edward Newgate, right? If your list is, you know, missing a couple 2Ks, maybe you took a couple 2Ks out because you can't run it. It's not, your deck list is too tight. Well, 6 it is, man. And eventually, that's just going to be backbreaking for some players. So 12 Edward Newgates made it in there. What's even more surprising to me that it's only one Zoro that made it in there. Not only did this Zoro was the only one that top 32'd, he's the guy that took it all the way to first place. Congratulations to Anthony. That's crazy. Running through a field of 12 Whitebeard is not easy. And a lot of these other matchups aren't easy themselves. Crocodile, Katakuri with their new advanced support, Luffy, Queen, like all of these little side ones that you know, don't make up the majority of top 32, their matchup is really, really difficult. So interesting top 32. Now let's talk about exactly what are the circumstances that could have led to this top 32. Now, since this list or this event happened the day right after the set released, that's already going to create a recipe for unrefined list, right? Everyone just got access to their cards. Maybe you don't have all your cards. You know, your cards are expensive at this point in time. You know, PPG did have access to basically the entire set. So if you went to the vending booth, you could get whatever card you wanted. You just had to pay that premium price of release, which is tough for a lot of players. So a lot of these lists may not be running the optimal 4-ofs that they can, or maybe not these lists in top 32, but maybe a lot of the player base wasn't playing. Maybe they're playing Queen without 4 Yamatos, or something along those lines could have very much happened. What's also double down interesting is that this regional went from being an OP3 regional to an OP4 regional to an OP3 regional to an OP4 regional. So maybe players that were going to attend this, right? Because a lot of, you know, people that come to these regionals have to go ahead and make their travel accommodations ahead of time. If, you know, Bandai kind of said initially, you know, I spoke with PPG, I work with them pretty closely, that this was going to be an OP3 regional. Then that got changed to OP4, and now these players that were like, well, we were testing OP3, now you have to change really quickly, and that's really hard to do on the fly, which makes a good reason why a lot of the things haven't changed. So you might think to yourself, yeah, these decks are very powerful, nothing's changed, meta hasn't changed. Don't sell that just yet. That idea, that mentality isn't refined up to this point. So I will say, yes, Edward Newgate strong, Law strong, Zoro strong. But are they this strong? We'll have to wait for more tournaments to come out, because I want to see if this pie chart maintains a very similar ratio or shifts in the coming future. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these deck lists. We're going to immediately dive into the Zoro list from Anthony. Now, Anthony does have, you know, there are a couple of YouTube profiles where he's talking about his list and him and all of that stuff. So this was the list that he took into the regional. Now, he played a 3v3 beforehand where he played more of a Nami Straw Hat variant of Zoro, which is very strong. There's a lot of really good variations of Zoro, so it's, you know, find your choice. And I did watch the interview. I thought it was very interesting to see his thought process on a lot of these cards, but there are a lot of things that are pretty much staple in red, right? We got Curly D and the bunch, right? So everyone say it. We're playing red, Curly D in the bunch. We've got 4 Curly Dodons and then 4 and 4 of another searcher of your choice. Anthony went for Izo and Buggy this time, and we have Makino and Otama, some of the most absurd 2Ks in the game. Since it's Zoro, we're going to be playing Megara as well as Gordon. I mean, Gordon is just an awesome card. He can be anywhere. I love him. He can be whatever red deck we're playing. But there are some really interesting cards that Anthony is playing, right? So up to here, not really too impressed. It's about what you expect from a Zoro list. I do think this Gordon at 3 is something that not a lot of Zoros do, so I do like him doing this. I enjoyed playing this card at 3 in Luffy for the longest time. I think he's awesome. But once we get to Blamenko, we now got, what's going on there? So Blamenko is a card that states when attacking, it's very similar to Brook from, I'm not sure if he's from the structure deck or if he's from the set, but it reduces the attack power of a card when attacking. He is a 3K, Dawn times 1 when attacking, reduce the cost, right? So in Zoro, you have a Dawn on Zoro, a Dawn on Blamenko. Blamenko is now 5, which is the magic number. You swing, you reduce, you Gordon, you Marco, you gaming. You get what I'm saying? So I do like this use of Blamenko, but not just because you have like combinations of attack reduction with Gordon and Marco, but you also have, you know, sometimes you don't have to go and reduce that far. You can just reduce just a bit. A 6K that becomes a 5, now it goes into the range of Fire Fist, and you can pop a 5 and a 6 with just one reduction, which is really darn nice, right? A 5 and a 4 technically after the reduce. You can also combo it with your Marcos. You can combo it with Gordons, your jet pistols. There's a lot of 1-2 punches, which is very much what I like in red and why I choose to play it in my Luffy decks more often than not. So Flamenco, really cool addition. He is only playing 2 of it, but it is searchable by Izo, which is cool. He's also playing 2 Vista. Jozu as just a 2K searcher, so just for consistently on the 2Ks. Marco, because that card's absurd. He opts not to play the Whitebeard because honestly, in this meta, I get it. Whitebeard comes down, makes your leader 7. You don't really do too much on that specific turn because your leader is Zoro and most of your attackers are 1-drops. And if you make your leader a 7 and you don't use Zoro effect plus your Dawn here, you only get 1 attack that turn. And if you only get 1 attack that turn and they just go Red Rock on your Whitebeard, what did we really accomplish? Another card that I do find that's interesting is the 2 of Marshall D. Teach. This seems ambitious. This card is really strong. Let's start off with that. Marshall D. Teach is a bananas card. But what does Marshall D. Teach really lose to is removal. Oftentimes when I played this card in OP-03, it would just get pistoled. It'll get immediately removed. It never really got to get that swing off. And that's why I liked it in VV, because VV would give it rush. But in a format in OP-04 where people are playing 3,000 worlds in multiple quantities, a lot of the red decks are playing removal. I find that this card, I don't know, it just feels like a hard brick. Obviously in his interview he talked a little bit more about it, so if he was able to turn this card sideways, kudos to him, because that card is basically winning. And then we've got a list of very interesting events. He is playing one of the Table Manor Kick Course, which is fantastic in this deck because there are a bit of uncounterable cards, aka Gordon, Buggy, Marshall D. Teach. And not only that, you can pitch any events if you tap out too early, right? So I do really like Table Manor Kick Course for almost any red deck. This card is absurd. And funnily enough, is also searchable by Nami. And then he's also playing the really classic event lineup. The only ones that are truly interesting is the 3 of Fire Fist. I think 3 is a really good ratio, very similar to Gordon. And the 1 of Fiery Doll as a removal or a finisher. So I really do like this list. I think Anthony did a really fantastic job cooking this one up. And if you want to go ahead and look at his interview, I think Card Ape right here, go check him out. First place Zoro deck profile for Knoxville Regional. He's a little bit more specific and insightful on his own deck list, so go ahead and check that out. Then we've got William's second place Edward Newgate deck. William, I don't know him like that, but I know him as Will to Win Gaming, so congrats to him, kudos to him on getting second place at the Knoxville tournament. Playing Edward Newgate. I know that Will to Win Gaming people do really heavy on the Whitebeard. I think this is they're big enjoyers of Edward Newgate, which respect. Very strong leader. So he played a Straw Hat variation of the deck where he's playing a couple of interesting choices, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about those. Initially, we got 4 of Gum Gum Red Hawk, which seems like an excess amount, right? This card has a fantastic trigger effect in life. Yeehaw, it has all these beneficial upsides. Well, this card doesn't really trigger in life in Newgate, right? Because you're just killing yourself anyways because of your leader effect. So we're not really playing it for its trigger. We're playing it for its active ability. So if we're playing it for its active ability, what are we trying to hit? And I think the reason behind Will to Win's choice for the Red Hawk is to make the matchups where they're going really low to the ground, aka Law, which is a 50-50 matchup. It's not like a turbo loss matchup, especially if you're playing 3 of these Luffys. But you want to really solidify or cement your winning percentage in that matchup, yeah, you can play more of the Gum Gum Red Hawk, and that's going to go ahead and take care of that. Also, since he's not playing any Izos, he's not going to really have access to a couple of the Whitebeard event cards, specifically Whitebeard Pirate Searcher and or the event card, I think Crossfire is the specific one that is really helpful versus very specific decks, aka Rebecca, which I don't think you struggle with, so you might not need. He's also then playing a pretty large count of the 6Ks, 6Ks. I do like 3 Monkey D. Luffy's, 3 Ace, 4 Thatch. Now, the reason behind 4 Thatch, more than anything, I would like to think, is because of the fact that Thatch is just outside the range of 3,000 worlds. He's big, so he's not really easy to remove. The only form of removal that you'll see for Thatch is like a 10-drop Whitebeard, a Katakuri, things along that nature, Red Rock. And if you're Red Rocking this, you don't feel too bad. He also has counter power. I don't really know exactly what more to say about Thatch. What I do find interesting as well is the choice of not playing the blocker Marco, but he has such a low Whitebeard Pirates count that I guess I can understand it. But heavy on the 2Ks, 1, 2, 3. He has 12 2Ks, but that's, well, pretty standard on the 2Ks. Actually low for Whitebeard, but he's really heavy on the event counters. And then he's just playing, maxing out on the really good cards, aka Marco, Ace, you know, Newgate and these things. So it's a small list. It's very compact, you know, a lot of 4-ofs, a lot of really powerful cards, and Sanji, we'll keep seeing him, and I'll refer to him in other deck lists, but very interesting card that's on the come up. If you want to go ahead and see his specific thoughts about it, go check it out on his channel. He got a whole tournament recap. It's a 44-minute video, so if you want to go ahead and see him talk about his deck list, his choices, his matchups, go ahead and check him out. Cool guy. Then we've got Grayson in top 8 for Crocodile. Is one of the only Crocodiles that made it. Now Grayson, friend of the channel, was able to talk to him about his thoughts on his deck choice, his not only in using the Crocodile and some of his specific techs, where we have an increased Pacifista engine, which I think is really interesting. But other than that, Crocodile is a cool leader. Crocodile is in a really nice spot to be a very strong meta contender with the additions that it got in OP-04 in forms of Gum Gum Red Rock, the Kaido, and yeah, that's basically all you need. I mean, we got Sasaki, but let's not talk about that. It's basically these cards right here. These 3 additions are fantastic for the leader and exactly what the leader needed to boost it into a front position. So let's talk about Grayson's choices. I'm gonna take a little whew. All right, so let's talk about his choices. He has a pretty good amount of the 2Ks. He has 4 of the Kayas, 4 of the Sasakis, 2 of the Mihawk. Now, why did Mihawk lose his favorability? Well, we're not really Don Quixote do Flamingo. Don Quixote do Flamingo wants an increased amount of Mihawks because we can go ahead and just bring them back to our hand. We can recycle them, recycle our 2Ks. But in Crocodile, he's just kind of like, I'm never summoning this card. He is a 2K that could sometimes theoretically possibly attack. But more often than not, he's just a 2K in hand. And if we're just going to use a 2K in hand, we have just such a really good variety of them in the form of like Kaya is just better, Sasaki's better. This could have honestly been Mr. 2, if anything. It really is a 2K of your choice at this point in time. But then the other cards, obviously 4 of Miss All Sunday card is bananas, as it can buy back some of the most powerful removals and great defense in the game. We've got Flamingo Blogger. You know how much I love him. Sentomaru package. Chef's kiss. What I do like about his Sentomaru package is not only is he increasing the package by playing Bartholomew Kuma, which is a 4-drop blocker that can also summon a Pacifista from hand, he's also playing the blocker Pacifista that can come out from the deck. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of him. I do like keeping this guy at 1 if I can. Possibly, maybe is one choice differential that I would go ahead and immediately make, or maybe like up a 2K, something along those lines. But I personally am not a proponent of playing more than one of this Pacifista. You want your deck to be as live as possible. Now, you can argue, yes, he plays Kaya and Sogeking, which can filter, but even so, not a huge enjoyer of this card, especially when it comes out of life, right? So I think 1 on this would be my personal difference. But he was playing 2 with 1 of Law, 4 Pacifistas. Obviously, you got to play with the Sentomaru package. This is the bread and butter of your deck. 3 of the Sogeking for Cycle. It has counter power. It is a tempo tool. I really enjoy this card and really also helped Crocodile last set become very close to nearly viable, but it still didn't break that attack threshold. It still basically capped blue at 9K, but Kaido came in and shattered that ceiling, making a 10-drop 12K for the blue archetype, which is exactly what they needed to go ahead and push for tempo. Not only that, we've got another fantastic 2-cost event counter. Now, we don't have to use Love Beam because Love Beam doesn't have a trigger in life, whereas Dragon, Twister, Demolition, Breath does. That's such a long name. And the trigger in life is huge. It is bounce a 6K to hand, which is basically if they were trying to go for like a lethal turn and you really needed tempo, you can use it like that. You can buy it back off of Miss All Sunday so you don't feel bad about using the trigger. It's a really good card. 3000 Worlds. I don't really got to talk anything about this card. It's bananas, and so is Red Rock. So Crocodile in a mighty fine spot. Congratulations to Grayson on getting that, Luffy, man. Congrats, brother. And then we're going to talk about Katakuri real quick. Now, the Katakuri list. What did Katakuri get in set 4 besides mid-game? Nothing much, right? So we get Sanji. We get one of the most ridiculous... Not going to get too worked up about Capone. But they get Capone. They get Sanji, which is pretty darn good. And then what they do truly get in the archetype is a Pero Sparrow vanilla, and they get a dedicated Big Mom Pirates vanilla instead of Yamato. So These mid-game pieces that the deck was really missing are now added into the deck, and we are foregoing a bit of early game for that, right? In a meta where we're a little bit slower, we can forego playing a heavy amount of, like, basically the only early game this deck has is Sparrow and Sparrow. It really is just, can we please trigger Sparrow first life? First check, please. Thank you. And that happens so often, it's ridiculous. But it really is just Sparrow is the entire early game of this deck. And then kind of just banking on really good triggers and fantastic late game, right? This deck is chock full of 2Ks, bananas 2Ks, just there's a lot going on, man. There's a lot of really good stuff because the deck just wants to play these mid-game, really difficult to remove threats. Why were they heavier on the Sparrow than the Randolph? Well, the answer is 3,000 Worlds. And then we're just playing Mom Turbo. And then we're playing Thunderbolt just to push for game on the turns that where they're like, blocker, defend me from this big old mother. And Thunderbolt lets you get in there. So really like the list. Yellow is yellow. They got a lot of fantastic additions. Most, besides like the obvious, you know, trigger ones, Randolph and Sparrow, which are less obvious, are fantastic and exactly what Katakuri needed from this new set. We've got Law. Law is, Law's Law, man. Law is truly Law. The only interesting thing that I want to talk about and how Law has evolved into the meta is now that we're playing more of this Luffy as well as, drumroll, Sanji. He makes his way back into another deck list. What is he doing? What is he cooking? Well, if you guys don't remember, this is the Sanji that came out in the first set of OP, and he has a really interesting effect. He states, take a life and suck 2 Dawn, and then gain 2K. So why is taking a life and sucking Dawn good? Well, besides him becoming a possible attacker as a 2K, which is nice, right? A 2K that can attack is really, really good, especially in Law because you can swing with it, bounce it back, and then now you can use it as defense. The reason we use Sanji is more than just that. We use it for the take a life. And why do we want to take a life, especially in a 4-life leader? Well, there are some people that like to starve our leader, specifically Rebecca and Queen. And if we run into those matchups, Rebecca is not an easy one for Law by any means because they go ahead and starve your hand. And if you don't just naturally draw your Bonnies, you're gonna be in a bad spot. But Sanji gives us one more look, one more draw in towards finding it, and we can crit ourselves in a manner that doesn't feel too bad because we can just defend ourselves with our army of blockers and just kind of sit pretty. So Sanji making its way into not only Zoro, but Law is where it's really seeing a lot of its main plays because these decks that are trying to starve you by not hitting your life can't really do that anymore. I think Law makes better use of it than Zoro, obviously, because you can again swap, but I do like the fact that a card from set 1 is now starting to see play once again in the meta. So that's super duper cool. Then we'll talk about the Queen list real quick. Queen. Yep, it's big bombs the deck, right? You're maxing out on Katakuri. You're basically maxing out on Mihawk and Yamato. And then you're playing some of the best removal in the game, matched with blockers and 2Ks, some amalgamation of that. Now, I am in favor of Pound after playing more on the Queen list. This is a more standardized Queen variation that you've seen before. The additions of Soga King is because sometimes you really, really, really need to find these big boys. So if your Perona isn't finding it, if your Flamingo isn't finding it, then maybe Soga King will go ahead and draw you into them as well. So that's exactly what you want to do. Continue to play these bombs, go to low hand size, and then block up, right? So this is a very good deck list, very smart, very standardized. Good stuff, good stuff. And then lastly, I want to talk about this. This is weird. When I saw that Luffy topped, I was like, hell yeah, Luffy's still good. And then it was Black Luffy, and I was like, sips tea emoji. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting list. Now, congratulations to the player that topped into top 32 playing this list. Obviously, this is a very targeted deck list at playing versus, I guess, against anti-aggro. As you can see, we're playing some amount of Shanks and Kuzan combo, low Isho because we're trying to bank on these. This heavy CP9 package to go ahead and use Kaku to go ahead and remove some cards off of the board. And yeah, no, this is a smart deck list. This list was, I think, initially the first time that I saw a list of this nature was actually a gentleman in the European tournaments, and he was topping left and right with Black Luffy. I mean, he's just kind of like just plays black and he does really well with it. This guy is a fantastic black player, and I think this list is a variation of his with very small additions. I don't even think there's any card from OP-04 here, but go check this gentleman out. he ended up getting second place with this Luffy, and I think these lists are very, very similar. If you want to go ahead and check it out, it'll be right here in No Heroes YouTube channel. I think he talks about his choices a little bit more. Now, I know that's not the guy who topped with this Luffy leader, but I haven't seen any videos on that just yet. So go ahead and check this guy out for a better, more in-depth explanation of the Luffy from the starter deck. Now let's go ahead and talk about the market watch. That was quite a long section of the meta and analysis and all that good stuff, but we'll talk about this really quickly. There's not really much left for the market watch to say, but man, oh man, I was right about some things and I was wrong about certain things, and that's life, right? Now this Sabo being 300 bucks, sips tea emoji. Yeah, I didn't think it was gonna get this low. God damn, that's low, man. I don't know what to say. Besides the fact that the box has dropped from $99.99 to $87.99, which is really, really close to market price, what does that really mean for the consumer bases? The fact that our boxes are now getting close to MSRP is because people, I guess, now we're getting to a healthier format of the game. People are actually they did these pre-orders thinking to themselves, well, we're gonna bank off this one, man. We're gonna go ahead and pre-order. 15 cases of Kingdoms of Intrigues. We're gonna flip it. We're gonna, hell yeah. And they weren't able to. They're just trying to move their product now at like a net even, or they're trying to get as close to net even as possible, which is really, really cool, because that way we don't have like that whole scalping that was happening in set 1 and set 2. And that's just going to mean better prices for us players, which is always really, really good. We saw this with Digimon. We've saw this with every Bandai game. We finally found a way to figure out distributor issues, and here we are. So Rebecca, I was wrong about her. She maintained a pretty good price. Flamingo was the one that was actually a loser. My evaluation of both of them was a bit of a flip, although Flamingo is seeing more representation than Rebecca, I think, in the meta. I think Rebecca is a very powerful leader the more I've played with her, as well as Doflamingo. So these both being at these high, the heights of this box makes sense to me. Now, this Law, I didn't talk about the face cards, but if I had to talk about them in the last one, I would have put Law above Boa. This is a beautiful card, and I'm sure we're getting waifu taxed, but obviously the more competitive card ends up being the Trafalgar Law blocker as opposed to the Boa, but super cool cards. Didn't talk about them on the last one, but I'm surprised to see that only these two maintain their price, and we'll get to the other ones in a little bit. Yamato and Sanji really ain't surprising. Vivi is another one that surprised me. I did say this card was like 50 bucks. I was on the money. Now, what surprised me is not necessarily Vivi's price, but the fact that Crocodile and Queen are so low that they went below Vivi. This is weird, because competitively, what's going on? What is going on? I don't know. You tell me. The day of the release, I think like 2 days after, I was on top of this just to like look at prices to see if I can get any good deals. And I saw this leader under 30 bucks. I saw it selling for $24. And I was like, no way. Purchase. Moving on. Luffy being 37, that's fantastic. Makes it so that the Rebecca deck, obviously you're front loaded on this leader if you want to go ahead and max it out, but Luffy being 37 is not a bad price. Sabo's being 32 is really, really solid. Just overall good pricing. Veggie being only 30 is freaking awesome for yellow players. We're eating well. But what's really and truly weird is the fact that you got Whitebeard, Magellan, and Sakazuki at sub $30. Now, Magellan is a leader, a card that gets played a lot in the next set. So if I were you guys and am interested in playing Purple Luffy or some variation of Purple Red, think of maybe picking this up. This is an overall bananas card. Consider picking this up if you like it. I'm not a huge fan of the art, but it's a cool card. And then we've got Sakazuki, which I think he has just multiple printings, and because of that, he ended up being the loser out of all of them, since he is already like a winner prize card. But the winner prize card is $1,000, whereas this one looks pretty darn good and it's 25 bucks. So don't mind me. But yeah, the prices have plummeted and it's really good. That's all I wanted to say about this set. I feel like we're finally in a very healthy card price. Obviously, if you move on later into, you have, Kiros at 16. That's awesome. But if you're just trying to pick up things that aren't alt arts, which that's completely understandable. Not everyone wants alt arts. Sabos, Sanjis, you're just in a really, really solid spot. The fact that Pell is $5, we ace players are eating well. So, I mean, $2 secret. What is there to say? What else is there to say? So let's talk about the cards that have been climbing up and are kind of like the big winners lately. And these are cards from, usually I don't do this, but cards from the past that are climbing up. Let's talk about Katakuri. And the main reason I want to talk about it is because this is a card that I'm in need of. I don't own any of this card. And if I want to play any variation of my purple, yellow Croc or Queen or any yellow deck, you kind of are forced to play this card, and you don't have to play the alt art. But, you know, just wanted to show that his price has almost increased by 20 bucks. If you want to do percentages, that's almost like a 33% increase, which is pretty darn big over the course of a couple of weeks. Not only that, we've got Kaido slowly making his way up since August at 50 bucks. It's low, up to 75 once again with the more release of all these Animal Kingdom parts. And honestly, the deck ain't that bad. It's a really cool deck. Would I take it to a regional? Probably not until it gets more refined, but really strong leader, good effect, cool stuff. We also got the Katakuri from Pillars of Strength. If you didn't want to talk about, oh, well, that's an alt art. The alt art's the one that climbed. No. I'm trying to pick up the cheap one, and I can't even pick up the cheap one. I think I picked one up at 20 bucks a couple weeks ago, and now we're at close to 50 bucks. I'm not paying 50 bucks for this card. I guess I'm just not playing yellow. But seeing this at 50 bucks is good. It's good for players that amassed some amount of these during set 3. And I have a friend he was the proud owner of 6 secret Katakuris. He was complaining. He's like, man, I got all these Katakuris. Never going to be able to move them. This card is it's too cheap for what it is. And I'm like, well, you're on the come up, man, because they're about 50 bucks now. So crazy. Mihawk, the alt art, is sitting at 75 bucks. Woo-wee. This is like a 250% increase over the course of, yes, a couple of months, but hell yeah. And I think a lot of the proponents behind this is basically Queen, Crocodile, Blue just in general becoming strong again. And the fact that, if you didn't own 4 of this in OP-01, this card was $15 in OP-01. 15. And just look at the art. Just look at it. 15. That's all I gotta say. But I think that's about it, guys. I'm going to wrap it up here for today's video. Obviously, if you've made it this far in the video, God bless you. This was a long one, and I do get rambly at times, so I really appreciate you guys staying here all the way up to the end, as always. If you got any comments or things that you want to go ahead and I may have skipped over in terms of the market watch, there's a card that I may have missed that has been jumping up in price, and you want to say, hey, have you missed this one? And I do that a lot, so don't worry about it. Go ahead and leave that in the comment. I really enjoy seeing the comments from you guys and interacting with you. So, leave a comment down below. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. And as always, if you want to see more One Piece trading card game content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.